there's a part of me that's like, are all sec units this intelligent, and could they all come to this conclusion if they had their governor removed? Or is this like because of Murderbot's experiences with the TV shows and all this other interaction with the humans, is Murderbot special because of its experiences?
I think more the latter, but I think it's kind of a gray area. It's unclear. Welcome, friends, to episode 351 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And this week we discuss Martha Wells' 2017 novella, All Systems Red, book one of the Murderbot Diaries. So this has been one we've had our eyes on for quite some time. It's a book I read a few years ago, really enjoyed. I've actually read a few of the novels, or the novellas, in this series. There is a couple of novels later on I haven't read. So I'm a little bit farther along than you are, because this is your first time reading any of it. But I haven't read the whole series, so I don't know everything that's going to happen down the road. And I think she's still writing these books. I think there's another one planned to release. I don't think it's done yet. All that being said, this is one I've been excited about. I really enjoyed Murderbot when I read it a few years ago. And this is my chance to revisit it and read it again, which was cool. It's a short read. I highly recommend it for people. And then we're going to be tackling this week and then moving into the show in the subsequent 2 weeks. But yeah, here we are. Excited to talk Murderbot with you, James.
I've been excited for this. There's been some high praise out there for it. I had high expectations, and I think this story met those. I love this character of Murderbot. I like the world that's built up. I like a lot of the social commentary that's in here. And then, Murderbot, I assumed was kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of name for a story based on what I was hearing about it. And man, if I didn't just find it to be so relatable for a character that's a robot, or at least there's some organic matter to it, but in general it's a robot. So
yeah, I think it is a very relatable character. It's someone that a lot of people identify with. It's kind of considered this non-binary icon. I think it has a sort of neurodivergence / autism angle to it that a lot of people read into it. Social awkwardness, not wanting to be around people, struggling with eye contact. There's all these things that totally make sense for the character Martha Wells created, but then also I think a lot of people see themselves, and a lot of awkward nerds especially, I think, relate to this really, really hard.
People reading short fiction about Murderbot probably are relating to. And I did, honestly. I found that a lot of that to be relatable. I feel like I'm extroverted introvert at times, but there's so much of this character with Murderbot where I was that is so funny coming from a robot, an inhuman robot, and then the humanity that's coming out of this character. I just found to be really charming. And, it's that whole scenario too, where it's a really powerful robot that is can kill someone or kill, these creatures that are out there in this world. And, but then when it comes to having a conversation or holding eye contact is
that's the hard thing.
Yeah, it's hard. And I found that to be really funny. And also, like I said, relatable in some scenarios.
So charming too, and it's not something that I think Murderbot would recognize about itself, but it loves humans. It wants to protect the humans that it's tasked with protecting, and yet it doesn't want to interact with them. But it also has a lot of past trauma, which we learn about in this book, around events where it has a memory of malfunctioning and killing humans, which we'll talk about. And it seems like it is hesitant to get too strong attachments because of that, right? It's I don't want to get too attached to them. They die really easily, and it seems like Murderbot blames itself if that ever happens, because it's the guardian. But then it's also the humans, they don't really understand how this technology works. They don't understand that a sec unit is even part human. They kind of think of it as fully as a machine. But it seems like there is a mix between biology and mechanical going on here. But because it's a novella, we don't get a ton of details about this. It's kind of the bare minimum is given to us to enjoy the story. And that's what I was reading Martha Wells saying is that was her goal for the world building and the the setting of this novella is like, just give the reader enough to understand what's going on and then move forward.
Up to this point, I failed to even talk about the most relatable thing about the character. And that's Murderbot is basically learning empathy through media and through like films and TV shows and things like that. And to me, I was like, oh my God, I think films and TV shows raised me and shaped my morality in such a major way, and like storytelling in general. Mm-hmm. But to me, all of that and like post-capitalistic kind of hellscape that they're living in, where you're talking about like these people are on this mission and they don't know what they don't know. Like it seems like there's these corporate overlords that are controlling everything, and then Murderbot's just a cog in that machine, and pun intended. But we get to this scenario where Murderbot's just punching the clock. Is like, I'm here to work, whatever bullshit, crazy stuff goes on. All I can think about is, let me just get back to my bunk and put this show on. And like that's incredibly relatable. Being like, I want to, there's so many times that I'm out doing something where I'm like, oh, this is brutal. Or, I wish I could get back to just continuing whatever story I'm on, whether that's a film or book or whatever.
Well, and it's also like, it's notable that it's these soap operas is what it really enjoys. It doesn't seem like it likes the like more dramatic, violent things, because that's too familiar to its life. It's like it wants to go to Sanctuary Moon, where everything's really like, I don't know, it's all about relationships and just kind of engaging drama.
Theatrical, yeah.
Yeah, and it I think there's like so many relatable things in there. Also, it seems that Murderbot is asexual, which makes sense for its creation, but I think a lot of people who are asexual also, see themselves in this character, because there's a line where Murderbot talks about skipping over the sex scenes because they're boring and like stuff like that. And I think a lot of people just identify with this in different ways. And Murderbot is just super relatable, and but then also activates that feeling you have towards someone who is being forced to do things against their will. And essentially, Murderbot lives a life of almost like a mechanical slavery, because of its very design. It is being forced to be a Murderbot. And it's clear that Murderbot has very conflicted feelings about that, right? Like even the name Murderbot is something it gave itself, because of its past. And it's like, I'm a terrible Murderbot, but I do a poor job at it or something. So like it kind of has this like I don't know if it's self-hate, but like guilt over its killing nature. Like it doesn't want to be this, but it also like fundamentally is that. And so a lot of it comes down to this identity question of like, can you be something beyond what you're sort of made to be? And that's Murderbot's challenge, but then also like finding ways to lean into that and say like, well, I am good at this, and so I'm going to use it to protect my humans, and and all these different things. So it's just such a, I don't know, like there's a reason I think Murderbot is one of the most beloved sci-fi characters, I think, of the last decade. People would say this is definitely among them. You can see why this character spawned a series that has gone on to be a runaway success for Martha Wells, which we can talk about. That happened much later in her career than normally happens for people. She had this like late career meteoric rise after sort of toiling in the mid-list trenches for the majority of it. So it's really cool to see this. I think it's really encouraging, and it seems like she's a good person who does things the right way from what I was reading.
Cool. Yeah. And I want to say I like the way that All Systems Red is written from Martha Wells' genius, I guess. Murderbot is an it. Murderbot is a robot. Murderbot is something that we would see as like subhuman, I guess, in theory, depending on how you feel about
like
that
the humans in this universe would probably view it that way.
Yeah. But as time goes on, because of the POV that Martha Wells chose, I feel like we as the audience get on board so fast.
It's first person from Murderbot's point of view. So you're immediately like identifying most strongly with Murderbot, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the way that we move through the story, and it turns out, Murderbot has more autonomy than someone should, maybe.
Yeah.
And,
so it has hacked its own I forget what it's like, the operation module. I forget what it's called. We'll get into it, but it has given itself freedom, and so because of that, it has more freedom than other sec units, which is what Murderbot technically is. Yeah, which stands for security unit. And like the sort of the way that occurred is still mysterious, and we don't really know all the details of that. But there's a certain freedom that Murderbot enjoys, and then it's also like very telling to see what it does with that freedom, which is watch a bunch of soap operas, basically.
Yeah. And the humor that's in the story, it's not on the surface comedic. It's almost like situational. And
It's
because
like
of the
deadpan,
perspective of,
right? Yeah.
From the perspective of Murderbot even, these things aren't funny. It's just to us seeing the way that Murderbot is engaging with the world is funny. Yeah, that first person POV builds what we would think of as an it into a character that is like is learning that like why it cares for all of the other characters in the story, like kind of rationalizing that, and then up to the end of the story there's a big kind of decision that it makes that is kind of, I think, puts a cap on kind of the whole messaging of the story in a really fun way.
Yeah, let's circle back to that when we get there. So for now, we'll keep things still fairly spoiler-free. I wanted to ask you, I've been hearing some things about the show. I'm not saying, I've heard good things. I've heard some people with some quibbles. I haven't personally watched any of the show yet, so I have no preconceived notions. I've seen the trailer, which I don't even know if you've watched. Did you watch the trailer?
I think I saw one trailer, a while back.
So I wanted to ask you, what is your read on the universe that this takes place in and its sort of overall tone, I guess, and sort of construction, and like what would you liken it to if you had to pick any other properties or anything? Like what?
Oh, interesting.
Like what is this universe like outside of Murderbot itself?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a fair amount of other material that's touching on this sort of setup for a world where, you know, these like giant entities have become almost like governments into themselves.
Yeah, like hyper-capitalist entities. Yeah.
And I would think like something to compare it to. I mean, like we just covered Mickey 17 recently. It feels like it's like kind of similar to some of what was going on there.
Yeah, I can see that.
Maybe Alien.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the Blade
Runner.
That's
what I thought of. Like this is a very like it's what's the name of that corporation in Alien? Wayland Corp. It's really Wayland Corp. It's this corporation who does not care about the people that it employs. And notably, I think the Alien series has the androids, which are often like some of the most interesting characters, right? And a lot of it comes down to them. And it's interesting how it's like, so in some ways, a lot of this is very familiar. And yet Martha Wells found this iteration of this android type character that feels fresh and feels obvious in some ways. Like when I remember the first time I read this, I was like, of course a character like this, right? Of course a murderbot who doesn't want to be a murderbot, essentially. And like, why didn't I think of this? You know, it's one of those where you read it and you're like, it seems so obvious.
Well, and I do love the way that this, like, especially with like Mickey 17 and this, because they're so fresh in my mind and they're fairly new as far as their release dates. It's like so funny to see how our world is directly reflecting, you know, future sci-fi, foreseeing where this could go. Because like Apple of all companies is adapting this, and I couldn't help but think about how that is hilarious.
Yeah,
and
the only more ironic one would probably be Amazon doing it.
Amazon, yeah. I was thinking for a minute, I thought maybe Amazon even was the one to adapt this, and I'm like, they is there a self-awareness there, or is it literally just money, dollar signs?
I don't think so.
And like, I just don't know.
You know, there's different levels, right? It's like the people who are buying it maybe recognize, but then there's the people who are above them, right? The CEOs and stuff.
Or do we have like deep state artistic minded people who are just like inside these corporations, like you know, creating weaknesses from within?
Yeah. I don't know. And you know, there's the whole conversation about media literacy and whether or not people who are watching these shows even understand that what it's about.
True.
But we're doing our own little part in that, hopefully, in getting out some
I'm doing my part.
Yeah. So the
Just
reason
like
I brought all
Troopers,
that up,
which has a little bit of that as well.
Yeah. So the reason I brought all that up was the some of the reviews I was reading from like when this book first came out were saying that it was a fairly familiar premise set in a very grim world, but Murderbot makes it feel different. Murderbot brings humor to it, and Murderbot brings like a heart and sort of soul to it that people connected with. And I agree with all of that. From my early viewing of just the trailer, and some of the reactions I've been seeing online is that people saying that like the show is taking a different tact with like how the universe feels around Murderbot. And so I'll be interested. That'll be something that'll be interesting to track as we get into the actual adaptation. So I guess we'll put a pin in that as something to return to at some point.
Just to theorize, I wonder if that means like more outwardly comedic, like the world is a little more ridiculous rather than being like kind of deadpan, like we were talking about before, where the humor comes from the fact that like, you know, Murderbot is an entity that like doesn't understand the norms in a sense, and because of that like and is only rationalizing based on its own experiences and what it can perceive. And I think that's where a lot of the humor comes in. I could see this being taken as like, oh, it's supposed to be like a, post-capitalistic kind of weird comedy or something.
Yeah. Well, and I think notably, because it is a novella, a lot of this stuff is not super, it's not that it's underdeveloped, it's deliberately left to interpretation. So I do think a lot of people bring their own insights into the world and like how they perceive the world, whether or not they perceive it to be dark and grim or if they perceive it to be something else. And that's why I wanted to ask you, just to kind of see where you were at with how you sort of viewed the rest of the world around Murderbot. So again, let's put a pin in that. We can return to that when we get into the actual adaptation. But I think I would first like to talk a little bit about Martha Wells, the writer. Then we'll get into summary and we'll be full spoilers at that point. So Martha Wells is an American writer of speculative fiction. She has published a number of science fiction and fantasy novels, young adult novels, media tie-ins, short stories, and nonfiction essays on SFF subjects. Her novels have been translated into 12 languages. She is praised for her complex, realistically detailed societies that she creates. This is often credited to her academic background in anthropology. She has won 4 Hugo Awards, 2 Nebula Awards, and 3 Locust Awards for her science fiction series, The Murderbot Diaries. So it is a very lauded series. And in fact, I was reading about how recently, in the last few years, she started declining nominations for these awards as she was getting further nominations for them, but began to decline them and say, other people should be considered. I think it's always admirable when you hear that, like, authors saying, like, I've won multiple awards now for this thing. It doesn't need more. Yeah. Let somebody else get a shot. I think it's very generous of people to do.
Absolutely, yeah, because you could just stack awards, but you could just to hear other voices and to have like it's like another form of like elevating other voices so they can be heard and their stories can be because awards, I feel certain types of way about different awards, but in general, like if something wins a Hugo or something, I'm sure that the sales skyrocket. So for somebody to get that kind of like,
I don't know if skyrocket, it is still kind of a niche award. Definitely, if it gets a major adaptation, scale skyrocket, and that's happened. Yeah. But this has been a series that has done really well, and even from its initial publication, has started doing really well, started selling out. That was one of the things I was reading. I'll link. There was a Wired article I read that was an interview with Martha Wells that was very interesting. It kind of gives a little insight into her as a person. She's a very prolific writer. She really got started in publishing in her early 30s, and since then has averaged almost a book a year, of different kinds. She got started in the fanfic space, writing a bunch of fanfic even before it was like big on the internet. She was doing Star Wars fanfic. She met her husband through Star Wars. She's a nerd, and I think a lot of the struggles that we see in Murderbot around communication and being friends and socializing with people is stuff that Martha has dealt with herself. And as she said, that Murderbot is the character she feels like she put most of herself into. So I think that a lot of that's very notable, right? The one thing I found that I thought was cool, a few things, but one thing I found, we like to talk about like the story seeds for things. Because I find that interesting as a writer. Like, where did this idea come from? So she was writing, she bounces between fantasy and science fiction. And for a long time, she was much more of a fantasy writer, really until she got into Murderbot. And then Murderbot became so popular that she's really been doing a ton of sci-fi around Murderbot, whether that's novellas, novels, or short stories. But she recently, in I think 2023, released a novel called The Witch King, which is like her return to fantasy. And she's been writing fantasy sort of off and on in the intermediary. She was working on, going back to before Murderbot, she was working on a fantasy series, and she was trying to come up with, I believe it was the final book in the series. She was like plotting it. And she said that when she was in the process of coming up with the ideas around that, this like scene popped into her head that was unconnected to the series she had been writing, and this was the scene. A security robot hunkered in a repair cubicle, mending its injuries. Wells was intrigued, so she sketched out an interaction between the bot, a sec unit she called it, or more informally, a murderbot, and a concerned scientist. And that was that. Cute, nothing more. Wells planned to kill it off and get back to Raxura, which was the series she was working on. But something stayed her literary sword. Quote, I always try to take the harder road, she tells me. I suspect it was a bit more than that, some sort of precognition maybe of possible greatness. This is editorializing on the part of the person who wrote the article. Murderbot had an attitude, a voice, one that seemed to almost write itself into being, Wells said. So then at a convention later that year, Wells bumped into an editor named Lee Harris. He'd recently joined Tor.com, working on its new line of short fiction, and Wells' agent had just sent him something for the line, a 31,000-word novella she was calling the Murderbot Diaries. Harris liked it from the first sentence. It was a deadpan, conflicted killing machine that just wants to watch TV. At the convention, Harris told Wells he wanted to publish it and make it 2 novellas. They'd use Murderbot Diaries for the name of the series, and the first installment they'd call All Systems Red. So that's the story of how she came up with it. That scene where it's been injured and is sort of trying to just heal up and watch its shows. I think that was kind of the first moment of this character's creation. And I love the idea that it sort of wrote itself into being because it was just such a powerful character.
Yeah. Well, and like to me, it's like almost like AI writing itself or something. You know what I mean? In a sense, like
well, let's not go there.
it wanted to be made so badly that it just forced its way into here with some sort of like sci-fi background.
Yeah.
I like that a lot, and that scene is really powerful. I think
I love that scene.
Gives a lot of really cool stuff as far as like one the regrowing that the self-healing that the bots can do, and then also like the concerned scientist, the way that like I almost felt like a borderline like familial love from one of the
Mensa.
scientists towards
Dr. Mensa,
towards Murderbot at times. And the way that Murderbot was just not interested was awesome.
Yeah. I saw it more as a recognizing of the humanity, right? Like, and there's sort of a shock that occurs in a lot of this team as they realize that this Murderbot has organic parts, period. And it's after they see the injuries. And I just love that scene where like Murderbot's like covering itself up with the blanket and is like, I hope it doesn't see that there are big chunks of me missing. And it's like, I can feel something leaking. And like, it's clearly quite wounded. It's unclear how much like pain it feels. I think we all kind of recognize because as it describes it, it's like, I have human parts and these human parts are injured. And so I think it's the idea is that the scientist is seeing this and going, I didn't even know. I thought this was just a full-on machine, but I see there's like a human-looking body underneath that armor.
Right. There is a level of, I think the party that goes along with Murderbot here in All Systems Red, like there is like a difference from a lot of the other parties, I guess, that we hear that are out there, like expeditions, that this one specifically is like a group of pretty diverse like scientists in the way that they are like viewing and accepting of Murderbot, and ultimately like they form like a found family kind of thing.
Yeah.
And how Murderbot responds to that, both positively and then also like almost ambivalently. Like
there's a lot of like I feel like Murderbot trying to protect itself from getting too attached. So I think we're ready to dive into the summary. But yeah, that's Martha Wells, an accomplished author who it seems very humble to me. Was toiling for years in the sort of mid-list area before hitting this surprise success later in her career. Oh, so as two enjoyers of Magic the Gathering, I thought you might find this interesting. In 2018, she was the leader of the story team and lead writer for the new Dominaria expansion of the card game Magic the Gathering. So I don't know if you've ever read Dominaria or not.
United?
But yeah, I think that was like it was the first Dominaria set, and then I think there's been a few subsequent ones. Maybe United was like a later one.
That was a later one, yeah.
Yeah, but she's one of the like lead writers for that.
That's
awesome. I thought that was pretty cool. So she does these tie-in stuff. She's written like a Star Wars novel. Like she does media tie-ins and stuff too. Like again, very prolific.
You know what I would like to see as an enjoyer of Magic the Gathering? Yeah. I would like to see a Murderbot secret lair. I would buy that.
There you go. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually, speaking of tie-ins, she did Reliquary and Entanglement set in the Stargate Atlantis universe. She also wrote Archaeology 101, a short story based on the Stargate SG-1, for the Stargate magazine, and she wrote a Star Wars novel called Empire and Rebellion: Razor's Edge. So yeah, she's done a number of media tie-ins as well.
That's cool. I'm really happy to hear an author like this that worked and like did the groundwork for such a long time, like had some success like this, and then I appreciate the fact that it exists and it's such a, I don't know. I'm going to continue to say relatable, but
yeah,
only because I just appreciate the story, and I think it's cool to see this kind of character represented.
Oh, I guess I should also say she's a Texan, born in Fort Worth, Texas, and I believe lives in College Station, Texas now, and works, I think often does things with the college there, Texas A&M University, perhaps. So yeah, a Texan, for what that's worth.
Nice.
Okay, so let's dive into the summary, if you're ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, a scientific expedition on an alien planet goes awry when one of its members is attacked by a giant native creature. She is saved by the expedition's Sec Unit, a cyborg security agent which has secretly named itself Murderbot. Though it has hacked the governor module that allows it to be controlled by humans and would much rather be watching soap operas, the Sec Unit has a vested interest in keeping its human clients safe and alive, since it has an especially grisly past expedition on its record. Murderbot soon discovers that information regarding hazardous fauna has been deleted from their survey packet of the planet. Further investigation reveals that some sections of their maps are missing as well. Meanwhile, the Preservation Ox survey team, led by Dr. Mensa, navigate their mixed feelings about the part machine, part human nature of their Sec Unit. When they lose contact with the other known expedition, the Deltfall group, Mensa leads a team to the opposite side of the planet to investigate. So let's stop here, talk about this opening and the setup we have here. We kind of launch into it with a bit of an action moment where we're seeing a character getting attacked and Murderbot steps in and seems to kind of get like semi-eaten by this thing and then like is able to destroy it from within and like shoot through its brainstem or something. But it's not described in like a very intense action way. And in fact, it's almost written in this way of like, Murderbot is so matter-of-fact about it, right? Like, Murderbot is just like, this is just what I do. This is what I'm good at.
Surgical.
I love the way that it is, I think, later described how Murderbots, the way they tend to fight is to just throw themselves at things and try to murder the fuck out of them or something like that. Like, they're very just like they have no self-preservation at all, and they just fully go in, and that's exactly what Murderbot does here. And in fact, we kind of skip ahead to the healing sequence that we just talked about, where Murderbot's sort of healing itself. But we find out that it was like kind of talking to this person that it saved and like keeping their spirits up and keeping them alive. And it doesn't even really remember doing it. And it has to like go and review its own feeds to see that it did that. And I was like, oh, I guess I did do that. Really interesting, some of these ways that in which it engages with memory and like it's very human-like. And I love to me that you can explain that is the case because it is part human, and we don't know how much of its mind is a human brain. So as you're looking at this and going, this doesn't seem like a robot, it can be explained by saying, well, yeah, but we don't understand how much of the brain is actually a human brain.
Yeah, human parts, at least. We don't know where things fall. But the first scene, it's cool too because Murderbot almost like it knows why it's protecting it. All right, so the reason it's protecting these people at first is because this is an easy job.
Yep.
That allows Murderbot to watch all the shows that it wants whenever it wants.
It's like these are its clients, and it wants to. It's kind of just like trying to operate incognito because it's disabled this governor module that allows humans to control it fully. And it's like, I don't want that, so I've disabled it, but I'm going to continue to sort of behave as if that's not the case, and no one will know. That way I can still just kind of watch my shows on the side.
Well, and I also love that it's not like controlled by humans per se. It's like the larger entity.
The company. Like any other entity can control it through this governor module, yeah.
And so like these humans, they don't know much about Murderbot. They don't know like the inner workings or anything like that. And so what Murderbot does in the scenario while saving that person is reveal its face as well.
Yeah, it takes off its helmet, and it's like, it regrets it immediately. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have never done that.
Shouldn't have done that. Yeah. Too connected. Like they're freaking out. The humans are making a big deal about it. They're looking at me. That's another, they won't stop looking at me. But while saving this person, asking like, do you have kids or anything like that? It's revealed that it's kind of learned this from the shows, right? Like this is all stuff that it maybe has seen before and like is just like regurgitating or like is like
using it to relate to humans. It's like I relate to humans through what I've learned from these soap operas.
Yeah, and doing it on instinct too, not doing it like in any sort of processing way. So that feels very anti-machine, right? Like that's like a operating off of instinct is an interesting thing to see this character doing immediately. And then that great healing sequence. It's pretty gnarly, right? Like there's blood and like fluids.
But the way it's
and
describing it is just like there are fluids leaking from me, but we know that it's such like a significant portion of it is human that we can imagine this is quite a grisly scene, right? And the way that like Dr. Mensah reacts when she sees it reveals that it is quite grisly.
And the way that the interaction begins, like there's a knock at the door, Murderbot answers, and then is like, "Fuck, I shouldn't have answered. I should have just pretended I was in standby mode or whatever." And it's funny because this entity is all torn up, and yet is like just like loving being back in its cell, just like watching in its whatever barracks or whatever, watching the shows while it recovers.
But I feel like there's an implication too, and it's kind of subtle, but like the implication is that Murderbot is in pain.
I think so. Yeah.
But Murderbot doesn't like sort of say that or acknowledge it really, other than it's like finding solace in watching the shows, and that's so relatable for a lot of people. Like if you've ever been sick or recovering, and how sometimes you want to just like ignore what's going on with your body and just like fall into a familiar show. And just kind of disconnect. And that's like exactly what Murderbot is doing. So I think, again, that relatability is like sneaky, but like I think a lot of people read this and they're like, yes, I get this. This is something I have done. I love that. And there's like another later part where someone, this happens, I think, in the next section, but I just want to jump ahead since we're talking about watching the show. It's like, has a certain amount of like downloaded episodes of the soap opera, and it's like some huge number of hours, and it's like there's no way the sec unit could have possibly watched that many of it. And Murderbot's like, you're underestimating me. Like,
well, the sequence is so good because somebody else who clearly has seen it, somebody else in the scientific party is like, this and this, like says something inaccurate, and Murderbot is like, that's bullshit.
That's not even true.
That's not how it happened. So
like proving that it had watched it.
Implying that it had watched all of it. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
I do want to say too, just in terms of like the way that Murderbot like analyzes social situations and has anxiety about like, how did the people interpret this? Like I felt like my neurodivergent mind was being prodded and displayed in a sense. I'll get lost in a conversation just being like, I wonder how they're interpreting what I just said or did in some way, and then like how that can be kind of a spiral that you can get into, and
it's like clearly very uncomfortable being perceived too. So I love that like during conversations they'll like walk over and like face the wall, and like some people in the group are like, oh, this is a weird behavior from this, robot, essentially. But then other people, you can see, like Mensah is usually one of them, are starting to say, like, no, look, it's nervous, or you're hurting its feelings, and like attributing these human emotions to it. And it's unclear to us how much of that is true. But I love that there's this like other story going on where you could almost see this entire book being written from the point of view of like Dr. Mensah, right? And it would be a very different story, but at its heart, it would be about Dr. Mensah recognizing humanity in this sec unit. Whereas instead, we got the sec unit itself learning to like look at these humans as a little more than just like helpless babies that it has to protect, and maybe it has a fondness for, but like is very resistant to getting attached to. Which is what is really more the story that we're following, right? And at the same time, there's this reverse going on with the humans and like trying to recognize whether or not we should have any attachment to the sec unit, and should we consider it like a person, or should we just consider it a machine, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. One of my favorite aspects of the story is the governor unit being hacked, and the way that like we're talking about Murderbot will walk up, stand in the corner, but then be hacked into like the security feed of the room to see everybody's interactions and still see. So like in that way, still being a part of what's going on, and it can still talk and all of those ways, but is like kind of isolating and like being introverted, really.
Yeah, and part of it's like it feels like essentially naked without its armor on too, without its helmet on. It's like, oh, I need to, I don't like being perceived this way by these humans. And then also there's like a moment where it's like, I need to not maintain eye contact with humans because they tend to get intimidated. Right. And so there's an interesting idea of like it is learned in the past that it's a very intimidating presence, and if it stares at someone, that is like perceived as threatening, and so it has to like not do that. Which I love. These little like analysis of these interactions is such a fun thing for a machine to be doing, especially one that's like a killing machine, ostensibly.
And not something that you would think on the surface reading the title Murderbot.
Yeah.
Now this is called All Systems Red, but that was such a good I don't know if I want to call it marketing, but a good idea as far as like having a hook to bring people in, right? Like Murderbot, that sounds like something that like
well, it's
the
Murderbot Diaries is the series name.
Yeah.
And, I think it's very appropriate to call this Murderbot.
But in general, when people are talking about this series, they're talking about Murderbot and how like that's like that's like sci-fi people want to read that story, and then how like it's kind of on the way in, it like tricks you with that kind of title, but it's fun, like tongue in cheek, and then at the end of it, it's like rewarding in spite of that and because of. But another thing I want to say about the governor is it becomes a big reveal, right? Like it becomes a thing where
it's illegal for this kind of sec unit to not have a governor module, and so it's hiding that from the humans.
Yeah, and understandably, the humans are like, oh shit, this hyper powerful entity has no governor.
It's like you've gone rogue. You can now do whatever you want. There's nothing preventing you from killing all of us or whatever, right?
And I like logically how the scientists work their way through it and being like, well, at any point it could have left us for dead or killed us or done all these different things, but instead it watched its shows. It was actually like preserving us, and like if the company wanted us dead, if the company had hacked it and said kill this expedition, we would have all been dead.
Yeah, I think Murderbot even points that out at one point, which we can get into. But Murderbot's like, yeah, if the company wanted you dead, it could have just like changed the environmental settings of this ship, and you would have all immediately died. It would have been very easy to do. So let's read that next section. So at Deltfall Habitat, and this is where they're going to see this other group is here on the planet. At Deltfall Habitat, Murderbot discovers that everyone there has been brutally murdered, and one of their 3 sec units destroyed. Murderbot disables the remaining 2 as they attack it, but is surprised when 2 others appear. It destroys one, and Mensa takes the other. Murderbot is seriously injured and realizes that one of the rogue sec units has installed a combat override module into its neck. The preservation scientists are able to remove it before it completes the data upload that would put Murderbot under the control of whoever commands the other sec units. The team discovers that Murderbot is autonomous and once malfunctioned and murdered 57 people. The preservation scientists mostly agree that based on its protective behavior thus far, the sec unit can be trusted. Remembering small incidents that now appear to be attempted sabotage, Murderbot and the group determine that there must be a 3rd expedition whose members are trying to eliminate Deltfall and preservation for some reason. The preservation scientists confirm that their hub system has been hacked and flee their habitat before the mystery expedition they have dubbed Evil Survey comes to kill them. So there's a lot of twists and turns here, but let's back up to the going to investigate this other group that has all been murdered. And I love that this is like an opportunity where we learn more about other sec units and like what this looks like when they're not Murderbot, when they haven't hacked their own governor module, right? And this is where we learn about like how 2 Murderbots fight each other, essentially, is described. And I love that Murderbot is clever, and in a way that it's able to kill these other ones is a lot of like just like understanding fundamentally like how they work and what they're going to do, and like kind of getting ahead of it and going like, this is what they're going to do, so I know that I can do this instead to counter that.
And ultimately they do get the jump on it at the end and are hacking it and are able to almost take it over.
Yeah, well, and then Murderbot shoots itself in the chest, which is like one of the ways you can kill one of these units. It seems like the heart will kill, like destroying the heart seems like it will kill a sec unit. So it does that to itself, but then the humans are able to bring it back like just barely and prevent the upload. But it does that because it's sort of worried that if you don't kill me it tells them to kill me right now, and they're like hesitating to do it. So it's like, all right, I'm going to do it myself. And it shows to me like the level of commitment Murderbot has to not killing these humans, right? It's like I need to die because I'm about to be taken over. And I think that gets at the sort of I talked earlier about how this is sort of a slavery tale in some ways. And that's something that Martha Wells has said that she notices people don't touch on as much as she expected. And that's, I think, one of the big fears Murderbot has is losing control and becoming the thing that it like fears the most, which is like a truly mindless murdering machine. And so the idea that it is about to be taken over and used as a weapon against these people that it has like taken on its prime directive essentially to protect, it's like, I'm going to just go ahead and kill myself to prevent that from happening. It shows like the true dedication that Murderbot has. And again, just makes us love Murderbot even more, I think.
Definitely. And
I could see this being a really powerful scene in the show, too, by the way. I hope it is.
Well, and mostly, too, because Murderbot has had something like this happen before. Like, notably, it's interesting, too, because Murderbot talks shit about the company a lot and how cheap the company is and how, like, these shoddy parts and things like this can lead to some really bad scenarios because there was something that was wrong previous incarnation of this Murderbot where I think it was some sort of like coding situation and it went rogue and killed like a bunch of people.
Yeah. The 57 people.
And it wasn't like it was like directed to do that. It was like a shoddy coding kind of thing where it just went AWOL.
So I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that this is something that is explored in later books. And there may be more than meets the eye to this story. But this is sort of Murderbot's understanding of what occurred, right? And so I will be curious to track this in the show. From what we've heard, the plot of the first season roughly corresponds to the plot of the first book, which is a pretty short book. So I was kind of surprised when I heard that. And so I imagine, even though the show is only 30-minute episodes, so they're pretty short, I still imagine some stuff from later books is going to be in there, right? Like that is just seems like it has to be the case, right? As we get more world building, as we get more background for this. So I'll be curious to see if we touch on stuff from later books. Again, I've only read a couple more, but even in those next couple books, you start to explore some more of the background behind Murderbot and what led it to be the way that it is now.
You mentioned it as like trauma before, like that's notable for this character to be walking around with and to make some decisions near the end of the story where you mentioned like not wanting to get too close to characters. And then, there is this like family and these people have come to care for Murderbot because Murderbot is saving them left and right and helps create this like plan here at the end with this what do they call it, evil
survey, the third survey that's here. And it's one of those where it's like, could there be a third survey? And Murderbot's like, there could be 100 other surveys. like the company could easily lie to you about all of this. So yeah, it's interesting how this plot plays out. We know there's a second one, but then we learn there's a third one, and the third one actually killed the second one, and it seems implied that like is going to now try and kill the first one. So I guess let's move into the final bit of summary here, and we can put a bow on this. So the evil survey team, Grey Chris, leaves a message in the preservation habitat inviting its scientists to meet at a rendezvous point to negotiate terms for their survival. Murderbot knows that Grey Chris will never let them live, but has a plan. It takes an overture to Grey Chris to negotiate its own freedom, but this is a distraction while preservation scientists access the Grey Chris hub system to activate their emergency beacon. The plan works, but Murderbot is injured protecting Mensa from the explosion of the launch. Later, the SEC unit finds itself repaired and retaining its memories and disabled Governor module. Mensa has brought its contract and will bring it back to Preservation's home base where it can live autonomously. Though grateful, Murderbot is reluctant to have its decisions made for it and slips away on a cargo ship. So that is kind of a simplified version of what goes on here at the end. We can touch in more on that, yeah.
I find it interesting that said that specifically Murderbot didn't want its decisions made for it because I didn't read it necessarily as that as much as this was a decision that it made to have full autonomy. While this is a great scenario, I think this leaves Murderbot like vulnerable one with all of these people to have to take care of and care for and get close to, like you said. And I think there's something that many people in life as humans also struggle with is like getting too close to people and like that, how that, like I said, leaves you vulnerable to all manner of things. I think Murderbot sees this as a mercy to the people, to itself. I think that it knows that it's like craving some connection now. I think that it knows that like it appreciates those for different reasons, but ultimately sees going off on its own as the ultimate sense of freedom and more so than like being overseen and almost like indebted to these humans in this way.
Yeah, I like that. I think for me also, on top of that, there is a layer of this identity crisis that Murderbot's been struggling with throughout this book. I am I'm a killing machine. That's what I am designed to do. That's what I'm good at. I like to watch these shows and I care about these humans, but like sort of there's an ownership of like, I am a SEC unit and at my heart, I am a very good killing machine. And so at the end, when it's being described of like this life It's like, you can just live with us and you can live a life of peace and you can be our sort of friend. And it's like, maybe I could be a bodyguard, but like, there's not really any place for a sec unit in this world. There's not really any place for a murdering machine. And it's like, maybe you could argue that like Murderbot it needs to like go through some more growth to like look at itself as something other than a murderbot or a murdering machine, but it's not ready to yet, at the very least. And maybe it never will, because even though this is a story about a certain sort of slavery around its design, I think it's also about this identity crisis of like, I don't necessarily love everything about who I am, yet it is who I am. And to me, it reads like these humans, even though their heart's in the right place, they're trying to give a life to Murderbot that is like not meant for them. It's like, that's not a life that a sec unit is able to live. Like, that's none of the things that I am able to do, that I'm designed to do, that I'm good at. Like, that doesn't play into this life you've sort of chosen for me. So I think there's an element of like wanting the freedom to choose for itself, but I think there's also an element of, at least at this point in its journey, it's not ready to say like, I'm just going to not be a sec unit anymore. I'm just going to hang out and be, because it has a lot of kind of distaste for what it calls these what are the sex bots or the comfort units that it talks about. It's like, I'm not a sex bot. I'm a murder bot. Right? Like, this is what I'm good at. I'm not good at human connection, because those comfort bots are supposedly like really good at human connection. That's what they're designed to be. And it's like, that's not what I am.
I feel that like the arc that this character is on is going to be one of like finding its identity and like finding happiness outside of being a murder bot, maybe. But like, I like that you said that it's not ready for that yet.
Yeah, because like it feels like it doesn't want to be a murder bot, and yet at the end it's kind of choosing to still be one, right? And I think it's because it's like I am one. So like, I need to find a way that I can be happy with my existence and yet still not like lie to myself about what I am. And maybe some of that's trauma, right? Like, maybe some of that's that past trauma of like, feels a lot of guilt around what happened and maybe thinks of itself as inherently dangerous. But also like, there's some acceptance of like, this is what I am, and like, these humans kind of want me to be something that I'm not.
And I do like that being like a valid ending too. Like, it's valid to not be ready. It's valid to keep, like, you don't have to wrap it up in a bow. And I think that's like in a narrative, and also like in
especially an ongoing series. Like, we got future books to write. Murderbot can't retire this early on.
But I also mean just in terms of like being a human, like you don't have to be ready when people want you to be. And I think there's some cool messaging to that as well. I like the way that this story subverts a lot of expectations and plays with that and does it in a way that's like heartfelt and like true to life, but also in this like, you know, far-flung future that has all this, you know, these other elements of where we could possibly see ourselves down the line if we're not careful.
There's an interesting bit. We didn't talk much about the negotiation and talking with this evil survey and how this plays out, but the Murderbot sort of volunteers itself to be the one to go talk to them, and it reveals in that conversation that it has overrode its governor module and is sort of a free agent. But it plays into this idea of like, because I'm a free agent, I actually want to negotiate a way to like give up my humans, and I'm this sort of evil murder bot. So like, it leans into that perception, and then it uses that as an opportunity to sort of double cross the other group, because it does in fact care. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Like, what did you think of that exchange and the subterfuge that goes on there?
Yeah, I think that back and forth is really interesting. I think that Murderbot realizing, like, at each turn, Murderbot is like, no matter what they say, they're gonna fucking kill me.
Yeah,
they're gonna destroy me.
They're gonna agree. They're gonna play along,
but
they're going to kill me. Yeah.
And so there's like multiple times along the way where Murderbot has them in a corner. They agree to something, and then it's like, no, that's not how it's gonna happen. Because they're like, yeah, just come back with us, and we'll do this and this, and we'll go meet with your party. And the whole time it's like, no, that's not how it's gonna happen. And so for Murderbot to be that far ahead, I think it's really cool. You know, there's a part of me that's like, are all sec units this intelligent, and could they all come to this conclusion if they had their governor removed? Or is this like, because of Murderbot's experiences with the TV shows and all this other interaction with the humans, is Murderbot special because of its experiences?
I think more the latter, but you know, I think it's kind of a gray area. It's unclear. And every time Murderbot kills another Murderbot, I think you are supposed to feel a bit of that push-pull, because ultimately Murderbot is killing a version of itself, right? Whenever it does that, it's killing another machine that doesn't have the freedom that it enjoys because it hasn't hacked its own governor module. And should we feel bad about it? And yet Murderbot does it because Murderbot fundamentally understands what it used to be and like knows that like what it's going to do and like what this Murderbot will do and that you have to kill it because there's no way to like talk to it. Like this is going to happen, so I need to kill it before it kills me, kind of thing. Like it's kind of a mercenary sort of view of things, but it's because I think Murderbot understands this world and understands this technology in a way that a lot of people fail to do around it.
And is rational. It's really interesting, the rational versus emotional response of Murderbot and the characters. Like, again, the characters are having an emotional response when Murderbot is like, kill me.
Yeah.
Murderbot is like immediately like, I'm going to kill myself because it's the logical thing to do because otherwise, one, I'm gone and all of these people are gone.
That ties right into what I just said, right? Like Murderbot is so willing to kill other Murderbots, including itself, right? Like it's like it knows that at its heart it is this killing machine that needs to be taken out. And like you can argue that like the reader and like and on a 30,000 foot view, like looking down at it, you're like you're more than that Murderbot, but like it doesn't see that for itself right now, at least, right? It's like I am fundamentally the same as this thing, and like at any point I could be just as dangerous, and the worry that it's going to be is enough for Murderbot tries to kill itself.
Yeah.
So
I do think to return to that thing I was just saying too, with like emotional versus logical. What is that decision? Is it emotional? Like for Murderbot to save all those people by killing itself, is that logical or emotional? Because I almost feel like it's emotional. It's an emotional thing to do with a logical response. And like only Murderbot can do that. It seems like all the humans wouldn't have been capable of that. And it seems like all the sec units not having their governors hacked couldn't have done that either. So it's really interesting.
It's like a question around utilitarianism almost, because it's like Murderbot looks at it as a very cut and dry situation of if I become controlled by this module, everything about me that is different won't matter. Because I will be under the control of this evil survey, and I will kill all of these people. And I know that they will be hesitant to recognize that about me, and that once I'm controlled by this other device, these other people, I'll use that against them. Like I'll know that they're going to hesitate, and I'll use that to kill them. And that comes down to that fundamental like drama and conflict at the heart of Murderbot is like, I am this at my core. I am this killing machine, and at any point I am a threat to everyone around me. And they don't necessarily recognize that about me, but I know this about me.
In caring for the people, in having the foresight to care about what happens to the other people, that's almost an emotional response.
Yeah, and it's like it's like the counter argument to everything I just said.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like proving that it does care and proving that it can rise above that. Now, you could say it's proving it's able to do that if it doesn't have this like rogue governor module installed into it. So this is, I think, this is an ongoing challenge for Murderbot in the sense of like, there's this fundamental fear of losing control and losing what has made Murderbot different and, quote unquote human, and reverting back to that sort of mindless killing machine nature.
Yeah, I do. Just talk about the end too. I do love like the setup for, Murderbot goes down trying to help the people and then wakes up and is being bought and taken care of. And they're all like, no, we're going to just pay for it. Take it. No, you can't wipe it. We're going to take it.
Yeah. And in this particular system we live in, like bots are allowed to be this way, right? Like, there's certain laws around it. They're allowed to sort of be considered people in their own right, as long as they have like a guardian, which is different than an owner, but it's like implied that it's kind of similar. So there is a little bit of that element going on there too. Like maybe it's not true freedom.
Yeah. And that ending is being built up where you're like, oh, Murderbot's going to get away with all its friends. And then we're going to ride off and
beautiful
have this
ending
fun.
For this. Yeah.
Yeah. This ending where Murderbot can live in happiness and watch as much TV as it wants.
Yep.
I think it's such a bold move to have the decision be, no, Murderbot is able to, has developed to the point where it's going to make a decision for itself. And maybe it's not the right decision for it to be able to watch the shows as long as it wants in the short term, but in the long term, it may end up having more autonomy or whatever Murderbot's seeking, or at least the opportunity to seek what it is seeking, trying to figure out what it wants to seek.
Yeah, I love it, man. This also sets up book 2, which was probably my favorite of the ones I've read so far. It introduces my favorite like secondary character other than Murderbot. Their name is Art, which I'll say for the people who know what that means. If you haven't read it, you won't know what that means. I'll be curious to see if we get any hint of Art's existence in the show or not, or if at the end it's hinted at, or if we even get Art, and like it would be a surprise twist for me if that showed up in season 1, but maybe. And I really am excited for where a season 2 of this show could go if we explore like the book 2 storyline, which I think is a really, really good one. So, I'm really excited about this maybe being the potential of a start of a really excellent series. I hope the show's really good, man. Of course, no show is perfect. I'm sure there'll be things that we both have quibbles about, but I'm excited to get to finally watch this. My wife has been like chomping at the bit to get to it, so she's very excited that we're finally getting to it because I've been holding her. No, we gotta wait. I'm
the same way over here. Yeah, at our house it's been the same way. I've been like, we gotta wait. We're very close, but it's been like that for a month now. So it's like it's about time. Let's watch it. Yeah.
Oh, I guess this episode is coming out near July 4th, so happy July 4th, I guess. It's a weird time in our country and to feel patriotic, but times. I think there's still an element of like, we got to remember the sort of fundamental resistance against dictatorships that our country was fundamentally built on. So
there's some things to be proud of right now.
Right? Yeah.
In some ways, it's a time to be proud of the people. Yeah, and I think banding together in those ways. The government is a different story, but we can. Yeah.
Anyway, if you enjoyed our start of our coverage into Murderbot, for one, I want you to stick with us and join us for the next 2 episodes where we covered the show. We'll be getting into the first 5 episodes next week and then the subsequent 5 episodes the following week. But also let us know in the form of a rating and review on whatever app you chose to listen on. If you're on YouTube, make sure to like the video that you're watching, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. What's a good question we could ask here?
If you were in Murderbot's shoes, what would be your comfort show?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. What's your comfort show you're going to watch when you're healing from your megafauna fight where you've gotten your holes torn into your body? Leave us a comment below, whatever you want. We're curious to hear your thoughts about our conversation we just had, always.
And be sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, pretty much any social media platform you can think of, all of those at Ink to Film.
And if you'd like to support this podcast in another way, I'm going to give you 2 ways. One, you could buy this book, which we just covered, All Systems Red. It'll be in our bookshop. The link to that is in the show notes. So you look down there, click the link, and then if you buy it through Bookshop and our Bookshop page, it doesn't cost you anything extra, but we get a little kickback from the website. So it's a good way to help us with no extra cost to you. Also, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/inktofilm, where we do monthly bonus episodes that are either like sequels to adaptations, alternate adaptations for ones that we've done, different things like that, little one-offs. We have fun over there, and we'd love to have your support. That's also how you can vote on upcoming projects. For as little as $1 a month, we'd love to have your support on Patreon.
And thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, that's it, man. For the first book in Murderbot, I really hope that this is a success, that we enjoy the show, that people like this coverage, and that we can return for future seasons because, we've gotten burned recently with Wheel of Time getting canceled. I'm still sad about that. So let's support the stuff we love. I hope this show is good and that we get multiple seasons of it because I know there's a lot of really good stuff ahead.
Yeah.
So I look forward to it.
I'm excited to jump in the show, and I would love to read more of the book and continue to cover it on the podcast. It's a great excuse to read great stuff.
Yeah, go hole up in our bunks and watch hours and hours of television.
Yeah.
That's what we like to do.
Yep, we do that.
All right, until next time.
Keep adapting.